Hey peeps, I guess this is gonna be like an update of sorts. Don't expect this to like fully happen in the next couple of days since I'm on a couple of personal things, but I feel like it's been long enough. So I'm just gonna talk about a few things. I just also want to point out that I had a twit longer on my Twitter explaining why I was gone for a while, and I will go over some of the points I mentioned in that here. This is gonna be long, but I've got a bunch of bullet points which I'll separate into like sections, and like you can skip to something if it, if you're interested in it in some way or something. I don't want the channel to be completely dead, but it's just gonna be a bit inactive, and, well, here's a couple of my thoughts on things. Perhaps maybe why I was gone as well. So yeah, here we go. This goes back to the reason I joined YouTube in the first place, and especially that you kind of have to take into consideration. YouTube never really was going to be a main source of things for me in terms of like making content. Like, in the past, parts of it might have been, but like it was always one of those things that it was sort of secondary to what I was doing otherwise, be it like interacting with others on other sites or something, since I just treat YouTube as a site where you post videos, because that's how I learned of it. And I also don't see the methods of interacting with people as very substantial, because it's just a site where you post videos, a video site and a site where you post videos and people comment on them, not really interacty discussion type things, friendly. So you kind of have to realize, like, I joined YouTube in 2011. It's going to be 10 years, like, next year. It's going to be 9 at the end of this year. And, like, back then, YouTube was sort of just beginning to start how it is now with all the commercialization and stuff like that. Back then, it was a little more closer to the olden golden days of YouTube, with the old videos and everything with that. So my point is, that's how I treated YouTube, as a site where you post videos. So it wasn't really going to be my main like focus of things. For a while I did SM64, it was going to be, but it's not. I'm not going to be on it posting videos every day. You're never going to see that from this channel. I might post videos sometimes, but not all the time. But the main reason I was gone is I just wanted to avoid anything to do with the copper stuff while it was going on. I feel like since it's died down a bit now and I'm kind of out of the radar, it might be better. It just then the main concern comes with like scheduling and everything, and I'm not very good with scheduling, as we'll go over, but I kind of wanted to avoid that whole thing because I'm in support of it to a degree. I don't like the idea that kids below the age of 13 are joining the internet with the idea that they're somehow entitled to it based on a perhaps in some cases misconceived notion that you're smart enough to have the rights to, which back then I definitely remember thinking of, and like I definitely remember thinking that kind of mentality back then when I did join when I was 13. So I can only imagine if similar people around that age are thinking similar because they can understand their parents' conversations, that they're somehow entitled to getting on the internet, even though at 13 even, I was not very good at distinguishing other people's opinions and having discussions with people, because that part had not fully developed yet and had led to arguments that I regret the outcomes of. I regret the consequences of even dealing with those arguments in the first place. So I kind of don't want others to be going through that same thing through similar misguided notions. So, like, I kind of figured in the back of my mind that that rule was there for a reason, and I agree, okay? And that's kind of why I labeled my videos as not really for kids. I like a lot of kid-oriented content. Okay, I'm not one of those people who likes super realistic stuff and stuff that like leans so much on reality that it's considered acceptable or something. I'm not one of those people. The stuff I'm into that I post about would be the kind of stuff that kids are into. But I do not intend to target kids. The kinds of kids that YouTube thinks you want to be targeting are the ones that are watching videos for like toys and like mainstream, the average YouTuber type thing, the ones that go like, comment, subscribe at the end, the stereotypes essentially. Those are the types of videos that target kids that would be under scrutiny for these types of things, even though it was YouTube doing the ad personalizing, not these YouTubers. My point is, I labeled all of my content as not for kids because I'm not targeting those kids, and I'm not targeting the kids strapped to an iPhone or iPad or any type of tablet or smartphone device just watching videos because they can't properly be parented. Okay? I couldn't care less if someone of that type is watching my videos. Go ahead, enjoy them as you wish, but I'm not targeting you. I kind of don't want to be targeting you. So my channel isn't really for kids. I like seeing the release date and the comments of a particular video. I like fostering discussion of some kind, even if it's very minimal. So I wanted to avoid this copper stuff while it was the big topic and thing going around, as well as concerns about content and other things. But mainly I was just being quiet to avoid things going on. That's also why I don't monetize my videos either, by the way. I don't monetize them because YouTube back then, videos were not monetized, it was just a hobby. That's the way I treat YouTube as well. And that comes with its own caveats, so take it as you will. And you might think I'm still making it with the text I use. Okay, like, I'm a stickler for having sentimental things and not really changing those things. I made like the text format with the pink and blue, the pink text and blue outlines in like 2013 when I was making the series. And like at the same time, it was also like a Sony text thing. It was just the text that I liked using. I didn't see why I needed to change it. So, like, when the time came, because, like, let's go back a little bit. In 2013, the end of that year, which was around the same time I was in YTR and all that stuff, my computer back then had a virus. And I have no idea where I got it from, but basically, the virus acted very weird. It was... Okay, I open Task Manager a lot to monitor my programs and forcibly close them whenever they take too long to close by themselves. So, there's a process, and in Windows, it's... I mean, you would see it anyway. There's a process called explorer.exe. It manages your taskbar, it manages your folders, everything in regards to your folders is explorer.exe. The virus disguised itself as one of these, sapping most of my CPU, and it would repeatedly appear in Task Manager even if I forcibly closed it. I logged when it appeared, and it kept on creating versions of itself, potentially to keep sapping CPU and eventually crash the computer, probably. What it would also do is it would create an entry in Volume Mixer, because I have a billion programs open and they all have differing levels of sound, and some are too loud, so I've got to turn them down. So I usually have that open, and there was an entry from like Windows Explorer, which normally doesn't have an entry to itself. That's usually reserved for like system sounds. And like, it would just play advertisements. And not obviously either. It would be on mute. And if you tried to unmute it for a while, you could hear that it was playing some advertisements, but it would mute itself again at some point, like a second or so later or something. And it would be like a different advertisement every time. It was just constant stuff. So, in order to fix it, we went to like... My mum took the computer to several computer shops, all of which did not do anything to stop this. We managed to get one guy who suggested factory resetting the computer. And like, because of that, I had to siphon everything that I wanted from that computer before it got completely reset. So, I looked for everything. I got all of my files out, and like everything, my SM64 documents, everything at that point. And including the Sony text presets. Imagine taking 3 minutes to explain how you keep your Sony text presets. But yeah, I found out it through the registry where they were, grabbed all of them, sent them to the new computer, well, like to a hard drive to go to a new computer, and voila, I have now kept them for years and years and years and years and years, and I refuse to delete them, because since I know how to keep them, why get rid of them? So you might think, because of them, that I'm still making SM64 content, or there might be people out of the loop who still think I am making SM64 content for whatever reason, even though I haven't in like 3 years. I made a video, which I will link in the description, explaining my reasons as to why I quit making SM64 content. A couple of people have a couple of misconceptions that I've been hearing repeatedly, which I'm going to clarify here. Some people think I quit because Starman 3 was such a piece of crap and influenced me to stop after the finish of the Cursed Invincibility frames, which, no, he wasn't. If things had happened according to plan, I would have still done the series with him in it even. I had kind of said that for years while I was still under that assumption that I was still going to keep going, because those were my plans. I was going to use him as a character for, at that time, skits that probably would have revealed more of the identity of those kinds of people. If not, it would have just been like that crossed with the idealized versions of him seen in like SMG4's videos and Mario's. That kind of thing. Otherwise, like, you know, it just would have been simple stuff like that. He was not the reason, because if that was, I would have quit making Coif to begin with. And that went on for a few years after, because I just really wanted to finish that project. And, like, if he really had gone that far, like, why would that affect me? Why would that only affect me after Coif? Why wouldn't it have affected Coif? So it didn't. Don't get me wrong, he's still a piece of crap and his videos are still crap, as I've detailed in my long comprehensive commentaries, which I will keep up for all of the internet to see. But he was not the reason, fully, that I quit. Don't think it doesn't factor in at all, but like, on a scale of how much does this really affect you, it's like barely, like, atomic, the impact it has on my decision. No, the reason I stopped making SM64 videos, again, has to do with the fact that a lot of people were losing interest in the time that I was making the videos, and a lot of the videos were structured around other people and their characters reacting to certain situations, mostly jokes that we shared in the Skype groups, or, the Skype groups then. And because those people lost interest, and because those people were so important to some of the, progression of some of these scripts, because they were so important, I could not just simply change it. So, and this happened multiple times with a lot of people, to the point where I was left with two people who nowadays I'm not even friends with anymore. I have no idea where Charmix went, and I'm not friends with Enzo anymore due to a situation that happened between us in the middle of last year. So, your next question might be, why didn't you try and change the entirety of the series altogether? I wanted to continue off from Coif. That would have been the next step from Coif. I couldn't just alter the pathway. It's not the kind of thing you can easily change. It was simply that we were growing up, and a couple of us just didn't want to do this anymore. And eventually, at a later point, I discovered Splatoon and everything to do with it, including all of the data mining information that I came across. So, with no real reason to do any of the SM64 stuff anymore, I just left it behind and updated you all, made a new color code, and went for greener pastures. Again, there's also the fact that, as I mentioned in the update video, recording SM64 back then was a bit of a chore with the kinds of detail that I wanted to put into my series, with the fact that I needed like 7 windows open at a time to record anything in order to replace textures and monitor all of the color codes that I had. I know nowadays there's such things as like model hacks and stuff like that, but the way I want to tell the story that I'm making now, or, well, have made, SM64 is not a factor anymore. Coif is finished, and if that really has to be the end, then it can be the end. There's nothing wrong with that. So, there's no real reason for me to continue. I've left the color code up on the ending video where I explained, and parts of it I don't really agree with anymore. But my decision is clear. I'm not going to delete any of the old videos that I made, because that's an archive of my history to remain, and including all of the dates they went up. If YouTube decides to get rid of their quality or something over time, then that's YouTube's fault, not me. I will not be editing those videos whatsoever. I have the videos, I even have their original files in case anything happens. So that's been the case ever since I started YouTube. But I'm not going to make anything more. The promise I had made then was that I was going to make one more video, which was the blue thing, clarifying the in-between between, like, episode 5, I think, and, like, the beginning of the episode in which he's actually introduced, I forget which, in my Adventures Bloopers series. Which was simply just continuity patch-up. And that was it. I wasn't going to make anything more. If you want to do anything with my character in your stories, again, I have no problem with that. But I'm not going to make anything, and it has nothing to do with anyone else. It also doesn't have anything to do with some of the situations that I encountered later, to an extent, where a couple of people who know who they are had made me feel very uncomfortable for a long period of time. Again, they did not fully impact me because I was making my own decisions completely separate from that. Left's kind of the wrong word. I had not wanted to deal with them for a while, but that doesn't mean that I wasn't going to connect the two, because I really don't feel like that really should factor into the decision. The main part was mainly the fact that I needed to have 7 windows open that I really didn't want to do anymore if I didn't really care about the story that I was making anymore. So, that's it, and my decision is made, and I hope people get it this time. If not, I guess they can come back here. A couple things, okay? A long time ago, I went digging into the DVD case that is in my house, where I tended to keep a lot of old discs of my PC games, and that's where I dug up Kid Pics and all of the edutainment games that I played. That's when I decided, what are my thoughts on these games now? And that's when I recorded what I did. They are not deleted, I've just kept them unlisted because I don't know when I'm going to continue it. It's not that I want to completely stop, it's that those videos took up time, and everyone just looked to the Kid Pics one. That kinda wasn't the point. Especially since, like, there were a couple of games, there was one game that I couldn't record because, screen recorders are a pain to deal with when they can't actually record the game and they're just recording my voice and the audio because of the way the game is made, and it's not able to be windowed for some stupid reason. There's one game that I really want to skip to, but I don't know where it is, and it may take me some time to find it. As you might have guessed, a lot of the games that I played in my childhood were edutainment type games. Like games to teach you English and maths and learning tools for that kind of thing. Those were a lot of the types of games that I played as a kid. And one of these types of games, I had this... Okay, there were 4 discs for this stuff. 2 of them were Winnie the Pooh discs for, like, maths, I think. And the other ones were Mickey Mouse and Crew maths, and the other one was, like, maths and a bit of English. I think it was segregated by age, like it was preschool age and then, like, kindergarten age kind of thing. It was a purple colored disc, and there were 2 games that I remember specifically from it. One was a, like, multiplication game or something where there was like UFOs or something, and you had to get the right multiplications in order to complete it. Okay, no, there were 3 games. The second game was Goofy sleepwalking on like a building or something. The last one, which I remember liking, and there's the reason I want to record it, is a hide and seek kind of game where you were in like an alleyway or something, and you were inspecting like bins or something to find someone before you got caught or something. My memory is very vague, but it was basically you were trying to find someone, and essentially I really liked that particular game and I want to record it. The thing is though, when we moved here several years ago, I have no idea where that disc went. We never got rid of it, but we didn't keep it with the other ones, so now it's just lost somewhere. It's in amidst the everything, and I have no idea where it is. I found all of the other discs that I mentioned, I think, but I haven't found the one mentioned that had all those games. And the thing is, I want to experience the games the way I experienced them originally, even if I have to use a virtual machine for porting it to like an older operating system, that so then I can actually record it. But like, I mean, like in terms of the actual media that I had of it, I mean like the original disc with the original games. Even if there could be a version online that could be exactly the same, I want to record the game in the way that I originally experienced it. Yes, I'm going to be that pedantic about it. So, I kind of don't want those videos to get any attention until I can find that disc, which could take me some time. So, until then, if you already know where the videos are, great! Not gonna do it though until I find it, and I really don't want to record anything else until I get to that, because I feel like if I do, the thoughts I have on the other ones could get muddied by the fact that I really want to play this other one that isn't related. So I really want my points to be fresh. So in order for that to happen, I need to find it, and I have no idea where it is, so it's going to take me a while. I know we never got rid of it because I really liked it as a kid, and I'm not the kind of person that really wants to trash a disc because it wasn't being used at the time or something. It probably wasn't in the right place at the right time and just got stuffed in with something else. That's probably what happened. But I have no idea where, so whenever we move again and we can look at all that stuff again, maybe I might find it. So until then, I'm just gonna chill with whatever I want to do in between. I've been talking about this for a while, and I'm still kind of in the middle of thinking about it, really. I don't know what to do about the Chao. I really don't want to make 20 videos like I did originally with the Chao. I'm not going to get rid of those videos. I'm not the kind of person who's just going to up and delete history, but I don't really know what I want to do. I have the Chao that I did raise on those games preserved, because this is going to be a long story, this one. I was raising them on the Wii for several years, and then I kind of wanted ways to raise them differently. So when I heard about the ability to mod them on the PC versions of the game, and that there was a tutorial someone made to port all of your Chao from the GameCube version of Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, I then decided I should probably get it so I can save my Chao there. And so that's kind of what I did. So basically, I sort of just deleted all of my save files on the Wii versions because I siphoned off all of those Chao into SD cards to bring them to the computer to port them to the PC versions, which I ended up getting on Steam. So that's kind of, and like, the humorous thing is that the Sonic Adventure DX ones actually didn't port over correctly because there wasn't one for that. It was just Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, so I then had to make like 6 save files for all of the ones on SADX, bring them over to SA2B, and then individually bring all of them over to the computer. So every one of the Chao is safe. That was kind of important to me. So every one of the Chao is safe. None of them are dead. But that was kind of a hassle. You might wonder why I didn't just start over on the new one, and it's like, I spent all this time, years and years and years and years, well, a couple of years, let's say maybe 2.5 in actual game time, of actually raising the Chao. I don't even think it's a year, even in game time. Let's say like a month, maybe 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. I have no idea how long. It could probably just be a few, like, months, really. So I really was sentimental about those Chao, and I really also wanted to see if they had any sort of hidden values that I didn't know about, that I couldn't just get by extracting the file, because, like, this kind of stuff isn't really known about, because GameCube hacking was not really obvious. Like, a lot of the hacks I had to perform to Chao were hacks from Chao, from Sonic Advance, from save file hacking on that, because it was a very roundabout. Okay, I would download the save files of other people's Chao on my DS Lite, which would then, through a flash card, transfer to my advanced cartridge, which through that cartridge I would then transfer up to the GameCube, and it was a giant mess of just... Eventually I found out how to bring a Chao to the advanced game, save the file, hack it on the computer, and then go through the DS to the Game Boy Advance to the Wii again, over and over and over again. And it was just like, if I really want to modify this kind of thing, which I really do enjoy doing, I really shouldn't be doing it with this kind of nonsense. I know how to do it, but it takes forever. So I wanted to keep my Chao, I wanted to modify my Chao, I wanted to bring them to the PC game. Eventually I did. It took me forever to do it, but at least I was only going to do it once and not a billion times. So one thing I noticed using a lot of the mods that I've seen is that the timer between Sonic Adventure 2 and a 2 Battle on Wii/GameCube, the timer for the Chao's lifespan is different, because when I went into the game after I did all the nonsense of porting over your Chao, half of the really old ones were practically already entering cocoons and basically about to die or reincarnate. Basically the moment I entered the game. And I would also, since I kept a couple of them on the Wii just to check, like, if I had the Wii version for just the SA2B ones, like, let me just not kid you, they were not dying immediately, or at least close to. Their values for, like, evolution and the like were really high, because you could see, like, their spikes and all that jutting out, and the evolution signs that you should be looking for were perfectly there and fine. But, like, they were not immediately entering cocoons. They were walking around the gardens fine. So, like, the timer between the two games, the two versions of the game, is different. Okay? So, this kind of ties into my next point. This is going to be a very, very long story, this one. I went to the Chao Island Discord for a while. And I was in there for a good period of time. Someone apparently already knew me from posting all the Star Road videos I have on here, which, alright, cool. The server, though, was one of those kinds of servers where it's all like, we don't want any drama, and we don't want any kind of negativity here. And, like, they were kind of just never wanted it at all, even though, like, you can't really avoid that type of thing. It's in human nature to have negativity sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes. You can't just expect it to not happen even if the subject is of a child-friendly thing, you know? So, in there, this is also the server where a bunch of the mods for the game people have made have originated from. And, like, I brought up the point of, like, currently the only way to make your Chao at least, like, slow down its stupid life meter, even with watching Fusion, is, like, the bar in Fusion, just turning it up a bit more. And, like, to an extent, in regular gameplay, I don't want the Chao to live forever in terms of actual gameplay. Not my personal gameplay, but, like, actual gameplay. But the timer for the Chao in the PC version is extremely short. I don't know what they did to it, but it's different. And it's definitely way too short. So I just kind of want a way to extend it without needing to repeatedly drag a slider across. I kind of had some other problems within the server as well. They had held these Chao contest races across the entire server, and they were randomized in the sense that your Chao's original stats were not going to be, were supposedly not going to be factored into the equation as to how they're going to race. So even if your Chao was just born from its egg, well, you kind of should probably give it animal parts probably to make it stand out. Technically, they were going to randomize its stats to some sort of average, so then it could be on an even playing field with the other Chao. I only watched 2 of these, but it was extremely easy to notice the pattern since there were several races happening within these 2 contests that I did see, and there was a common pattern among these races that sort of discredits what they were going for initially to begin with. The idea is that, and especially since the stats are not the same as your original Chao, the only thing that's preserved about your Chao is the Chao's appearance. So its type, its alignment, everything that you see on it is technically preserved for racing against other Chao. The thing was, though, I submitted 2 sets of Chao for the contest races when I got there. One set was a bunch of newer Chao that had been raised from eggs that had gotten up to very high stat totals in a particular stat. So one Chao was heavily influenced towards like swim, one towards power. I didn't do it for all of the types, but they were essentially newer Chao. And I think the only Chao that actually got to any sort of higher point was the one that had hatched extremely early on between like all of my Chao in terms of timeline. So, and then the second group were all either extremely new, low stat Chao, or older ones that had participated in races before in the GameCube version of the game. So, and then the result ended up sort of being half and half. One of the Chao that had raced before kinda did crap. All of the Chao that were new and had lower stats did crap. But two of the Chao, who were either old or had extremely good stats to begin with, was the Chao that didn't win but got extremely far. And something I kept noticing in these races, which most of them were not paying attention to, was a lot of the Chao with the lower stat bonuses, the ones that initially were submitted with extremely low grades and stats, who had in sort of my Chao's timeline of when they hatched, they had been newer, or they had, if they weren't newer, they did not have a lot of focus on them. They were just sort of chilling in the garden, not really given any focus towards like being the best Chao or anything. Those ones tended to lag behind often in the races, and they had no chance of catching up due to the way the races were done. Because of the fact that they had such low stat values, they had a disadvantage, and then they were unable to catch up, because then they ended up in the very, very, very far behind, and it was completely impossible for them to catch up, even with the fact that they were on an even playing field, because their stats inherently with this randomizer tended to often be lower than the other people's Chao, who were typically Chao with really high stats, or they had been given a lot of focus from the point of hatching. So really, you couldn't just submit any Chao if you wanted the chance to get win or get any far in these contests. Your Chao had to be given some kind of focus in terms of where you want the Chao to go in order for them to actually do anything. And like, I'm not really kidding when I see there was a pattern. There were several. One of them had like 64 participants, and there's 8 Chao in a race, and it's a tournament sort of deal, so you're just eliminating every Chao you can until you get to the last one. And then the second one was like a 128 Chao tournament, which, oh my god, patterns galore with what happened there. And it became extremely apparent each of the Chao that I had submitted that were deliberately, they weren't complete newborns, they had been around a while, but they were definitely newer compared to some of the Chao that had been hatched earlier, that had been competed in races on the GameCube games. And they did noticeably more crap than the ones that had been in the races, with a complete inability to be able to catch up. So, I don't know. I'm kinda a little distrusting of what they had said then. Along with the fact that I'm not particularly very character worthy for the Chao that I do have. A couple of them have context, but I'm not like the person to give each and every single one a particular trait or anything. I would post in the artwork, in the like area where you post your Chao doing random things, and most of the time I didn't really get any attention for them. Not that I was specifically intending to just get attention, but it became extremely noticeable that, like, even after a period of time, like, even after I would wait like several hours and there was like posts in other areas, they wouldn't post at all if I'd posted Chao most of the time in the artwork section, even if there wasn't anything else after that, which began to get a little bit annoying. There was also, it just seemed like there was a clear bias, because when they would post things, they would get a response practically immediately or a couple of hours later, whereas I would get mostly nothing in all of these same instances, pretty much. Then, when it was revealed that nothing was really being done about making, for example, like an immortality code, which had been requested by a couple of people when they had come in, and I had clarified to them that this was clearly probably not going to happen, but I was kind of hoping for you know, things to move along. And then that was the last straw, and I didn't really want to be in the group anymore. Has that affected my opinion on playing the game? No, I've just been busy, but I'm a little reluctant to sort of touch them for a while, since I'm busy with most of my other projects, and, you know, I don't really have many outlets to talk about the Chao anyway. I don't want to make 15 videos talking about the things again, just for them to not be seen. I know those videos were made with a really crappy camera on top of a box setup, and this would be screen recording. I don't know, I don't really mean it like that. I just sort of mean like, I just want to do something like live and happening with them at a time. And like, there's several of the save files that I have for them now, since I kept all of them. So, you know, I do want to keep them around. It's just that, you know, otherwise things are going to be a bit awkward. And also, with the version 8 thing, where because of what I mentioned in the server, now the owner of the mod has just completely removed the ability to keep your Chao from reincarnating or something. He completely removed that code. So yeah, thanks. As if you need to give me any more validation for leaving the group. So I'm sort of just gonna keep rotating between like version 7.5 and like the current version that exists, since like that code is gone. And don't get me wrong, I do know where it is. I have like 4 programs pinned on my taskbar for everything to do with the Chao. It's Sonic Adventure 2 the game, the Chao editor, the mod manager, and cheat engine, because I just messed around in Fusion, found the addresses for all of the Chao's lifespan stuff, including all the values that you can keep them at. So yeah, now I can just keep them at that point for however long I want, which is the way I like to play the game. It's not the kind of thing many people would want, but hey, until like I get smarter or nothing happens really, that's what I'm gonna be doing. So yeah, because that's kind of a hassle, and I'm busy with other projects beyond just raising a bunch of cute pudding babies, I'm not really touching them at the moment. I also don't really know how to work with them in terms of like a format or anything. I want to integrate them somehow, but I don't know how. I don't want to stream. I'm bad with schedules. The times I want to be playing the game and the times other people are up do not mesh well, because I do not live in a friendly time zone for that to happen. When I want to be playing the game is the afternoon, and most of the people I know who watch, or at least are aware of me, are not in Australia. They're in America. And in America, at that time, it's the middle of the night. So yeah, there's that to consider, among other things. So I can't do anything really for a while, especially since I want to do other things first. So it's kind of just gonna sit there in the back until it maybe either nothing happens with it, and I'll just play it privately and eventually leave them to sit, or like my project is finished and then I eventually get around to them. I really don't have any second decisions on the matter, but I do not like that server, and I do not want anything to do with it anymore. Please get me away from it. It sucks. But it doesn't influence that decision because the pudding babies haven't done anything wrong. It's just mama's busy. This is a personal project of mine. That like what I've been doing for the past several months. For the unaware, I've been making maps for the Source engine for a while now, and I don't really intend to stop. I'm sort of just taking a break at the moment I am voicing over this video because I did a really dumb mistake, okay? And now I have an ear problem, and it's kind of hard for me to focus with this ear problem. I mean, it might not seem like it with how I can talk normally, but really, it does affect my focus. So, because of that, and there's a bunch of smaller projects that I'm doing in between, I'm sort of just taking a little bit of a break while we sort this out, because it's kind of annoying, really. I kind of suspect it's like not really good. So I don't want to stop making maps. Most of my maps are going to be from Splatoon 1. They're also going to focus on the Turf War variants of most of the maps. At first, I wanted to get all of the big, really hard to do stuff out of the way, so then things later on would be easier. I kind of only have a few things left to do on that front, in that all I have to do with the remaining maps on the list is scale test them, organize them so then they don't take up as much space. I know an update just came out for the workshop where I kind of don't have to worry about that anymore, but I just want to do it anyway, so then you aren't downloading a billion redundant things for nothing. For no real gain. So, there is that. And also some other things. Okay, firstly, am I going to merge all of the previous maps? At some point, I will, okay? I kind of want to get through everything else first, in terms of like the scale testing and stuff, before I even consider merging the Plaza assets, the Octo Valley assets, etc., all together, so then things can be like all together in that. Alright? I'm not going to fuse like the Plaza and the tutorial together, because I feel like you can have one without the other, but in terms of like their content packs, I will eventually do that at some point. I'm just not sure when. I'm so glad that update came out though. Oh my god, there are so many add-ons on the workshop that I could just completely merge and not have to deal with that nonsense anymore. That was like having to make content packs for things. That was stupid. Well, if you have something that's over 2 gigabytes, you're kind of going to have to make content packs, but at least it's not 2 megabytes. 200 megabytes. That was stupid. Alright, so the roadmap for what I want to do is I want to scale test everything, which essentially, don't get me wrong, I did get some initial scale things, but that was in Blender with a T-post inkling, and my screenshots were of an inkling in the game standing next to random objects. So I kind of want to get a little bit more precise so that I'm not completely dwarfing your inklings like how the Plaza ended up doing the first time. So yeah, and because I have a lot of maps in the backlog, that's just going to take a while. When I get through all of that, is then going to be the point where I focus on every single map individually, so then they can all have their specific problems sorted before they get released publicly. Something to note, though, there are a couple of other maps in the lot that are not as caught up on, that I may need to catch up on at a later point. So that's also got to be a consideration. Another couple of things is that a couple of the maps that are in this scale testing bunch are maps that require animation, not a lot. And like, what I meant by animation initially was that it was something that needed to animate. The way Octo Valley currently works is that there are physics objects that you can move with the phys gun, and that's why the map is out, because that is kind of what I wanted. And for most of the moving platforms, I'm going to be doing stuff like that. For, however, some objects, though, for example, the windsock in Salt Spray Rig and Moray Towers is animated, and otherwise it's just a T-pose, and the T-pose is just a straight, it's completely straight, like the windsock is not blowing in the wind, it's just completely straight, like sticking out, like as if it just got blown directly inward by, like, I don't know, a fan or something. Like, not even a wind, like it was like directly being blown in by a fan. That's how it would probably achieve that position. But I don't think it should be like that normally. I don't really know how to apply animations, though, especially since tensions have risen again for like the 15th time, preventing me from sort of knowing about that information right now. So and also Moray Towers happens to be next, although it's not really the windsock specifically that is preventing me from working on it beyond, my motivation and my time. When I extracted all of the maps originally, I just sort of grabbed every map and their individual variants. The thing is, though, I'm going off the Turf War variants of the stages. The Turf War variants of the stages for Moray Towers and Arowana Mall changed near the end of the game's life cycle, the first game's life cycle, since most of this is the first game. And I didn't know which one to go for. Should I just go for the latest one? No, because then, like, what? We're gonna make people who make their Moray Towers launch stories inaccurate, like myself? No! I'm not having that! So I sort of just looked up a whole bunch of old videos and sought out to recreate the first versions of them, which for Moray Towers specifically, okay, in Moray Towers 1, which I'm gonna call like the launch version of like Moray Towers when it launched early 2015, it's Moray Towers. It has no side paths around the middle. It also has a billion bunkers where there would be those like electric box things. Now, Moray Towers 2 come March 2016, which is several months after the map launched originally in like early 2015. The Splat Zones version of Moray Towers becomes the Turf War version without the Splat Zone. So there's now side paths that you can jump to from like the center platforms. There's also now those metal boxes that I just mentioned, and the bunkers are removed. The base map on its own doesn't load these things. It only just loads Moray Towers without either the bunkers or the stupid metal boxes and the side paths. They're completely separate objects. And what I did initially, because I was sort of just laying out everything in Blender, these were two separate documents, Moray Towers 1 and 2, and the Moray Towers in both was in separate positions because I just went and loaded the bfres twice in two documents. I am that much of a dum-dum. And I compiled them separately. So, I've now got to go through the daunting task of merging them and everything. Which, given there's like about 100 assets for the stage, is gonna take me a while. I did the same for Arowana Mall, although that one's gonna be a little bit easier because the second version of the stage is just the version of the stage without all the extra crap. So everything around the middle and those boxes near the middle are like just deleted. There's nothing specific, like you're adding bunkers on top, like with Moray. So if there wasn't enough reason to hate Moray Towers in the video game, you can hate how it's laid out because, oh my god. So, like, I will eventually do it at some point. I've got a personal project and I kind of want to get this ear thing sorted out first. So then I can actually focus on it and deliver the results and not mess something up for some reason. If I do have to do it while I still have the ear problems, it'll be very slow because I want to make sure everything is right and I'm not missing anything because I can't listen to music properly without half of my face being muffled. So, yeah, the project isn't dead. I want to put these stories out and I still want to get them out somewhere. It won't be DeviantArt because DeviantArt is now going the mobile route of everything must be minimalist and black and white. And also every icon must be huge because everyone's browsing on a phone, even if they're posting stuff. The main point is the ladder, the part with the big icons, because I'm not browsing on a feasible setup for that kind of thing. The monitor I'm using for the desktops that I've been using in the past couple of years since I've had to change them for multiple reasons, due to the virus, due to me just wanting to move on to a better computer, and then that computer eventually just crashes while I'm working on some of the maps, and ended up needing to get fixed. This monitor has been the same, and during that time, in the latest instance, where, well, January of 2019, the summer heat got a bit too intense for the computer to handle, and I couldn't turn on the computer, so it needed to get fixed, and then it took a long time for it to get fixed. Eventually, it then finally got fixed, but then the monitor wouldn't respond to it because the guy who fixed it took it to his place and used it on a monitor there, and so the monitor here was like, what the hell are we supposed to render? So we then tried to look for a new monitor. I'd wanted a newer one anyway, since this one is like getting close to like 9 years old, because it came with the first Windows 7 computer that I got, which was like 2011-ish, and it's just stuck ever since. It's a really old, the resolution is 16:9. It's very big to most of the other things I've seen, but to most technological people, it'd probably be one of the crappiest things around. But like, we tried looking for a replacement. Someone on Gumtree nearby had a monitor, and even though we sent in a query saying we might want to get this monitor, he did not respond for like a week, and eventually it just got taken by someone else. Eventually the guy fixing the computer came back with a converter for the screen, so, you know, I'm using the monitor now with a converter for being able to see the screen. But it would have been nice to get it fixed. But even if I had gotten the fixed monitor, I don't like that the site is assuming that I'm browsing on a phone or need to have icons half the size of my screen, because it's just infeasible. I know a lot of people are comfortable browsing on a phone. I don't want to completely exclude people browsing on a phone, but I do not want catering to solely be to them. The way DeviantArt has been, it has been perfectly fine before that point. And if it was going to stay without this Eclipse nonsense, I would have stayed. It has nothing to do with any sort of crappy art or lack of attention or anything like that. It has everything to do with the fact that the site isn't going to treat its users with respect. And like, there have been a couple of instances of DeviantArt beginning to kind of be a little crap. There have been a few instances of that I've been beginning to notice more and more recently. When they ported all of their images to a newer server or something, most of my comics that were of large size on the site, even though I had set them so that you view them at full size, because at lower resolutions, the kinds of resolutions they think the comic should be viewable at, the text is kind of hard to read, and I didn't want that exactly for that reason, but they still set it to that anyway for a long period of time, and that just happened with every single comic that I had submitted during the time they were doing this. And with no real clear indicator. Was it just image compression? Was what a lot of people were assuming? Especially since mine are not really of professional quality or anything. They're just Gmod screenshots with a bunch of text over them in speech bubbles. But it kind of wasn't very good. And, you know, I like being able to see things on a computer. I don't have a phone, and even if I did, I wouldn't be using it to browse the internet, because I like a bigger screen and being able to see more information at once. I don't really see the point of, like, that on that kind of tiny screen in terms of specifically looking and posting art like that, especially when they could be very big. So, especially since it isn't feasible for me to replace a monitor otherwise, because the converter was something like $15 and other monitors were in the hundreds of dollars just for the monitor, after the computer had to have a big fee just to get fixed so I didn't lose everything and completely destroy progress. I was in the middle of working on the plaza when it kapooted, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people wouldn't have liked it if it just were upped and outed, myself included. Is their mentality now, and I don't support it at all. I'm not going to delete my account, but I don't want to give them any attention. So now I've got to move everything from there to a new place, and it's hard to find a new place because everywhere else on the internet is just following this stupid everyone browses on a phone mentality that I really do not like. And as a result, it's hard to find an alternative, and since I don't really need an alternative, since I'm not really posting immediately at the moment, I'm just sort of paused. I've sort of just been working on the project, as in the map stuff, by itself in the meantime, since I haven't really been doing anything to post for the story yet. I mean, I could do some bits if I wanted to and there was a suitable site, but, you know, there isn't, so might as well work on the things I can work on. And like, it's hard when things are crap. Okay? I just want to go through something before I go to the next sort of segment, the last thing. And I really want to make this public because This is kind of not okay. It's been going on for a while, and I hate it, okay? I really do not care who sees it. I really do not care of the implications it could have. I'm sick of staying silent about it, so I'm gonna say what I want. A long time ago, roughly mid-2018-ish, I was in a model porting group and a map porting group. Shortly after I had been dumped by user for being too passionate about this project. Wow, that's such a crime. I had nowhere really else to go until I was contacted by a couple of people to join this map porting group. I stayed in the map porting group for a while, and eventually I then joined model porting, because, well, it technically is model porting the way these maps are ported, but there was also the fact that during this time I had begun to figure out how to dump Splatoon 2's updates, and I was dumping the updates specifically because no one else was doing it. I really don't know why. People think Splatoon is the kind of game that doesn't really need to be constantly preserved with its updates, because a combination of people thinking Splatoon is just a meme game. Splatoon's updates are not substantial because no one looks at the gear or any of the changes happening to the stages or any of the minor incremental changes that happen over time. No! Let's just skip to 2.3 and 3.0 and nothing else. Yeah, thanks. So I then took up the task of dumping everything since, in case anything else happened. Since eventually I found out quietly how you dump Switch updates while Splatoon 2 was still going, and so since I was dumping the updates and intending to share them, I was then added to this group. Now, understand me when I say this, that dumping updates is not as simple as you might think. I've had people ask me, how do you dump games of a particular type, and it isn't easy. You kind of have to watch and observe a lot of things, a lot of abstract things, to even understand how some of this stuff even works. I also did not want to destroy my one chance of doing this because Switches are expensive. Not just that, but the game is expensive. I did not want my one chance at getting this stuff completely destroyed. So for all the intentions you could assume I was being private out of malice, was me simply trying to ensure that this wouldn't completely be destroyed. A Switch in Australia costs more than the kind of values that you'd expect from America. So please understand when I say that I didn't really want to say anything during that period of time about it, and that when I wanted to share the updates, I definitely had intentions, but like I couldn't just make them like a download link for everyone to download every month or so, because I didn't want those download links to get nuked so easily. You're gonna have to understand, you're walking on eggshells with this kind of thing. So, yeah, and so I dumped the updates for a couple of months. And I even did so with the Splatfest stuff after a while, which ended up needing me to get 2 other copies of the game in order to do so. Take a guess as to why. I'm not going to mention exactly why, but take a guess if you know exactly how the game works on it, at least at some kind of level on that in that way. But I was sharing them to this group with the intention, when I shared them, that they would be going to everyone for the source engine. Now, you might think I'm sort of just shooting myself in the foot. Why would I keep it so private if I really wanted it to happen that way? Is exactly the reasons I have mentioned before. I didn't want those chances to be shot down because they were so easily accessible. You kind of have to like balance a bunch of mentalities with this sort of thing, and it's not easy, okay? my full intentions when I was giving every update to this group was that they were going to go to everyone eventually, in the form of source ports or something. You know, the stuff that matters that people ask for. The, like, you know, the things that you'd expect. I wasn't just sending them to this group for them to just sit among themselves, which was what they eventually ended up doing. Lots and lots and lots and lots of Twitter posts formed of these updates. Mostly just promotional stuff for, like, artwork just shared among this small friend group. And this repeatedly happened, to the point where I began to get extremely skeptical as to whether the group was even actually going to pour anything, and especially since we had several arguments indicating that a couple of the members in the group didn't really want to do anything. I'm not even talking just rarely, I mean at all. So I didn't want to share to those who didn't care, and I left. Someone contacted me, and I naively assumed that they were just enthusiastic like I was to share the updates. So when they would ask for the updates when I would dump them, I just assumed they were enthusiastic. No, he was just funneling them right back to the group I left, so I blocked him and then ended up leaving for several months after that. Him alone and the entire community. This person is also the person behind the square at the moment. I'm pretty sure he knows who he is. I have no idea if he's even gonna listen to this giant thing. I'm segmented it up for everyone's benefit, in question marks, quotation marks, and given a question mark. But eventually that tension sort of subsided, and I came back to the map group specifically while the square was supposedly going to come out. During, I'd like to say, May of last year was when I made, if it's not, I'll be corrected, but I made the collision for the tutorial of Splatoon 2 when I was given that, and that was going to be part of the map. Then, because the collision for everything else was deemed unworthy and really crap, I then had to do the main square in its entirety, that is the main hub that you walk around, and all of the rooms, although only partially, because some parts of some of the rooms, like the salmon run room, were really hard to do. They're not really obvious shapes, and a lot of them were not really easy to identify what really should be solid or not. Some things are obvious, like the objects on the floor, but it's things like the netting or some of the signs in the room. It's stuff like that which isn't very clearly identifiable that sort of tripped me up, and someone else had to do all of that then. Otherwise, all of the other rooms and everything else was going to have collision mostly completely done by me. And it took me forever to do. But it's technically part of my project, because my project is just getting my stories to publicity. That includes getting the maps up, which also includes the square. If at some point I was going to do a square of my own, and there is like a small backup. There's nothing in terms of collision. I did the collision for the other version of the square that was going to exist, and it would take me a long time to sync up to a version of the square I was going to do, but if I was going to do it, I wouldn't really do it justice compared to the one that currently exists. Even with its flaws that I heavily disagree with, your skyboxes should not be boxes. Literal boxes. God. Just a little bit of a hint there. Because technically, I was going to do most of the collision for it, and like it is technically done and sent. However, it's taken far too long to get to light because of far too many things that have been sort of infeasible for it. The aforementioned making the skybox a literal box with the texture on it from the game instead of just using the sphere we get from the game in the way that everyone makes skyboxes. That's more convenient and not computer unfriendly. God. There's also, the reason I mention that is because skyboxes being spherical, our Earth is spherical. So when you look up at the sky, it, in terms of you looking up at a spherical sky in the game, it creates more of a more realistic illusion of that of an actual sky, much like how the actual game does it, since the actual game's models are actually spheres. So it's just more appropriate to have the skybox be a sphere, 3D, separated from the map itself. It's the way that all of my maps have been rendered, since that was the only way I was told, and it just seems to be the better way for it to be done. So it's just kind of silly that he's using this old method, because I don't know, I really don't know the reason. There really isn't much of a benefit to it. Our Earth is spherical. When you look up at the sky, it looks like a dome, you know, shape-wise. Splatoon officially takes that into consideration. Why can't we do that for our ports, you know? And especially for something as massive as the square. God. Also, Splatoon technically takes place on Earth, so all of this should be taken into consideration somewhat. There's a lot of things that he's doing with the square that I feel like are more just for showy offiness than actual importance. Someone had a comment on my plaza that they liked that there were no annoying NPCs, and which I had intentionally done because I didn't like that there was NPCs, even if they could be removed. And like, obviously the way to remove them would have been more obvious in if there were NPCs. I would have probably just made them like entities that could easily have been right-click removable, instead of, you know, not setting them to be that squid bot. But he was going to attempt to try to add Pearl and Marina dancing like they do in the square to the Splatfest version, which then ended up like taking a month off, which ended up taking like a month, and like I'm talking a month where he doesn't do anything to further this progress. It's just months of sitting on this potential promise that he wants for the square, and apparently got someone to do, but they never responded back with. So, oops, now we've got to scrap it. That's a complete month wasted. Because the square was initially going to come out before Final Fest. Then it was going to come out before Christmas. Then it was going to come out in January. I promise, he said. But all of those never happened. And instead it's just been sat on for, I imagine and assume, I'm not completely for sure, but his pride and reputation. Now, for a while, I haven't been able to do maps myself, like the Moray Towers thing, because of this ear thing, which is really annoying. It's like half of my face is muffled, and it's annoying, and I hate it, and I can't really focus all that well. I've been posting more and more on Twitter of progress of things that I have been doing for a particular map on that day. not every single step of the process, but when something occurs, I just try to update. And I've also updated about this ear thing on there as well. This guy, nothing. Nothing at all. It also doesn't help that he is extremely biased towards one of the individuals who existed in the model porting group who did also but nothing. So that also doesn't help in his favor towards anything really progressing. He's been making a lot of questionable decisions in the group that me and some others are not really fond of. Like, the kinds of people that have been added to the group are a lot of the kinds of people that are, and this was evident in model porting 2 back then, which is why I find it extremely suspicious that it's beginning to happen again, is that a lot of people that are being added to these groups are the self-deprecating, extremely cynical social media stereotype people that are constantly depressed and pessimistic. I mean the types that just post GIFs and only that and never really try to pull themselves up. It's okay to be cynical in some way, in moderation, but when the entire group is just that, and okay, I am exaggerating a bit there, the group wasn't just that. But when you have a person in there who's taking up a slot, and this was a Discord group, not a server, so I believe there's like a limit on how many who can join a group, so he's just taking up a slot, not really doing anything, while he sits there and actively admits to being proud of doing nothing. While the people that get added to the group, mostly promo artists and people porting other things, are not really contributing a whole lot and are just sort of doing their own things, like, independent from the subject of the group. It's kind of like, a long time ago I was at like the SMG4 wiki and trying to moderate people who were posting random nonsense that was really supposed to be like in the fun and game section in like the general discussion area. And it kind of got obnoxious to the point where like they were rotating text half the time. They were young kids at that time, so you can sort of understand, but there wasn't really anything happening. It was just this nonsense repeatedly and nothing else, while I assumed basically that I was the only person really trying to do anything with the wiki at the time. I eventually left that wiki and things sort of happened. I don't know what happened to the wiki now. I just don't want to edit it anymore. I really don't want to be part of that whole situation. But essentially what's happening with this group is sort of similar. One person in this group is actively proud of the fact that he does nothing to contribute to the main point of the group. He is not, like, I'm not even talking like rarely or barely, I mean ever. This guy doesn't do anything. And this was even apparent back in model porting, because he would also like whine to us that he wanted to do things, but couldn't control himself for whatever reason. Even when he was given prompts to help, he would still complain, which I have logs of, because I'm definitely not going to let that fall to the others. Basically, the kinds of people that keep being added to these model porting groups are the kinds of people that really should not be doing this if they're really going to be this pessimistic all the time. The kinds of people who express unsatisfaction at the idea of literally doing anything to contribute instead of whining about how crap everything is for the billionth time. Oh, the community is crap, therefore they don't deserve anything. Generalizations like that, which piss me off to no end, where it just devolves into gift spamming, which then devolves further into procrastinating, which then devolves further into drama, leaving, you name it. That type of thing. So, I don't want to have to put up with that kind of thing. It's not that I'm not going to make maps. This is a personal project. The fact these people are doing these things is completely separate and independent from me. I've had to kind of say this as a point to all of these things, because it's very easier, and I've seen this often, where people tend to assume the cause of this thing is the effect, like, the cause of the cause of this thing happening is the effect of this thing happening, which is not what's happening. I didn't leave SM64 because Simon hated me. I didn't stop playing Chao because this group was being particularly annoying. I didn't stop making this project because these people in this group are being extremely immature and obnoxious. No. It is not any of those things. It's personal decisions of all of these things, where these things are a factor, but they are not the driving decision behind why I'm delaying these things. The project is still going to happen. I still like Splatoon. It is still a personal project. That isn't going to stop because a bunch of idiots went immature in a server. Well, not really a server, a group. But I'm not really in that group, and I kind of want people to know, like, this is the kind of stuff that goes on with the square, essentially. I kind of don't want to give off the impression, by the way, that it's just, like, nonsense, but with the way people treat the game, it's very hard to understand if people treat it as anything more than just that game with the funny memes, essentially. There's one thing I want to do with the project, actually, that and it's not going to be quitting it. For YouTube specifically, at some point I want to make a video detailing sort of how you collision things, because I've done it enough times now that I feel like this should be public. I'm just not sure how. I have a billion examples of. I sort of just want to, like, use the Plaza, Octo Valley, and, like, a couple of the unreleased Splatoon 1 maps that I'm doing, just to sort of show a couple of the collision models that I've made that sort of show some of the process. I just sort of want to go through it because there's a private video that I made for someone on this channel. Someone sent me, this was before they quit, one of those pessimistic types. They sent me a model to fix up because their collision wasn't being accepted by Source, and so I just made the collision model the only way I know how in like a 40-minute video where I fixed it up, recorded it, and then sent the video back to him. It was an hour-long recording of that, of how I did it, so then he can possibly do it too. So I kind of want to do that, but more explaining as to I want to explain more as to the type of logic that is used, because some people just tend to think it's completely random, and I really don't think it is. It's just very complicated, and let me just also say, I'm not particularly a maths person, but it does involve a bit of maths, and I'm bad with numbers, okay? I know some things, but I didn't do very well when I did advanced maths in school. I had to drop down because it was too complicated. And even then, this wasn't really too hard once the logic was able to be followed, okay? So eventually at some point I want to make a video detailing that, but I kind of want to get through this ear thing first before I do any of that. Once there's like a sort of solution, or things eventually get better if they do, I will then try to resume posting and working on it, because I have a bunch of things I can do in between while I wait for this nonsense with the square to stop. If, or, tone down a bit even. Because I don't want to be added to groups where the sole sort of mentality in the group is that of overt pessimism. It's okay to be self-deprecating a bit. It's not like it's feasible to be completely happy all the time. But you can't just make the entirety, or at least the entire mentality of, and if it isn't direct gift spamming, it's the lack of messages, the lack of ability to keep up with things. You can't just make the entirety of a group's mentality, or at least the dominant mentality, and just make the entire group about just repeatedly saying the community is crap, just spinning that narrative to justify why you don't do anything or don't do as much, or why they don't deserve anything because you're selfish people and idiots, and I don't support it, and I really don't want to be a part of those kinds of mentalities, okay? I spent money and time to perform this project, and I'm not about to be told otherwise by people who think they're also superior because they have a bunch of other things that people don't. And especially if you are one of those people, to not say anything when those projects actively impact a large portion of the audience. I just want to go through the one last thing, in that there are no enhanced models being made for the Inklings, really. There are a couple of separate ones, but in terms of the one that was promised several years ago, it's not being made anymore. It's definitely not being worked on because all of you have been dumb and therefore don't deserve it. That's the decision. That's the thing though. No one's come out and said it. There are a lot of people who are still under the assumption that there are enhanced models being made. There aren't. They stopped being made a long time ago. A long time ago, they were finished. And then they weren't going to come out. And they still aren't. Ever. I don't have any idea where they are. Don't ask me for them. I have no idea where they are. All I've seen are pictures, constant pictures and videos of these things being spammed in the groups. In this self-deprecating manner, to continue spinning that the community is crap over and over and over and over and over and over and over again until, they haven't come out. I'm not totally innocent. There are mistakes I've made in regards to talking about these models, but I'm not about to have it anymore. Okay? I'm sick of staying silent about this kind of thing because I feel people should at least have known that they weren't being made anymore. Somehow, through somebody saying it. If that somebody has to be me, fine. It should have just been said a long time ago. Because these things were promised publicly on the Squidalicious model porting group and has just spread as a rumor among the entire community. And let me just tell you right now, the models are finished by the people who made them. But they don't care. Let me emphasize that with if I had written that down, they would be segmented between full stops. They do not care, they hate you all, they do not want them out. End of story, that's it. I hate it too, okay? It hurts me on a personal level to even say these things, but that is the decision. That is the decision, and I do not want to have it anymore. I'm sick of the fact that people keep thinking that there are enhanced models that are going to come out. That there are people worrying about that kind of thing. That there are people clinging their hopes onto that kind of thing. There are models being made. Other people have attempted to make variations of, but those are different ones. There are no real enhanced 2.0 model. There isn't going to be any for as long as these people are behind them. And let me also say that if the Square has taken half a year, it's still in development, probably more, and it still isn't out, then in development on these other versions of the enhanced models probably wouldn't be up to scratch and would still take an equivalent or an even longer period of time just to even get steps of the progress completed, because these people do not care as much about anyone receiving it. Generosity is completely alien to them, or because people have been dumb and therefore don't deserve it, even though other people might not have done anything and don't deserve that blame too. But oh no, they get blamed because they like this thing too. That's how these things work apparently. I hate to say it, I really, really do, but there's nothing I can do. There is absolutely nothing anyone can do or say about these things or these decisions. The enhanced models for the Inklings being made in the first place for the Splatoon 1 versions was kind of like lightning in a bottle with everything that happened in that period of time. It's not going to happen again. I would like it to happen again. Trust me, it's my deep inner personal wishes. But it isn't. These people are gone, and there isn't really many that can match them, because the kinds of people that still remain are the ones still whining about how the community is crap. So for as long as we have these people around being this way, creating this mentality that others outside label as toxicity and then subsequently don't want to join, and then also conflate that with Splatoon being a meme game and therefore not being worth the effort. Yeah, we're not getting any enhanced models again. All we're ever going to get is ports of newer models from newer games, and the in-game models, let me tell you, are very, very crap. What would I have wanted? Just for you guys to just have come out and said it. To not be so dependent on your pride and reputation that nobody even cares about anyway. The fact that you even are so dependent on that for... What makes that statement even worse is it's attention from people they apparently don't even care about. This attention that they crave from people that they hate. If you really didn't care about them so much, why did you keep it hidden? Why did you not tell them the truth? Why are you so dependent on them for their affection towards you? And I think they would have definitely said something had you not really been so quiet about it. You could have just told the truth. You promised these things publicly with pictures. The least you could have done is just left the group to indicate that you didn't care anymore. That you didn't care, you didn't want this to happen anymore, you just wanted to go. I don't even care if these things continue to remain silent and private and you were just left. That's great. That would have been great. That would have been a good enough indicator that alone would have just spread to tell everyone that they were gone and not being made. No! But you didn't do that, did you? Neither of you two did. Essentially, there aren't any enhanced models of the kinds of quality that you're expecting being made. There aren't any. They stopped being made a long time ago and they don't care anymore. So they're just going to sit in the hands of privates while they sort of just mess around with them to themselves, even though they don't really own them. Technically, since Splatoon isn't really their property, it's technically not mine either. At least I care to not be a selfish jerk. At least even in terms of even the telling part of telling people of something that you promised publicly. Anyway, I'll just get on to the next part. I'm gonna make this like a separate video entirely. I kind of want to voice my thoughts on this more. Similar to the whole Chao thing, I do want to record more with this particular game because I've played it since I was like 10. To some people, their simulator game of choice might be Animal Crossing or some other type of MMO. For me, it's this, because I was introduced to it at like 10, and like I've stayed with it because while it has a ton of flaws, a lot of which I could probably talk about, at its core though, it hasn't really changed what's made itself so good, and so I kind of want to keep playing it. It has a ton of flaws. Do not get me wrong. I have literally in the time I've been reintroducing myself to it, I have literally been tripping on bugs like rocks on the floor. They are that abundant. But in terms of what's been happening with Pokemon, while Webkinz also has its fair share of straight rip-offs, you can't really get rid of the core of the game, no matter how many things you do to it, because it's just evidently more niche, and if it did do that, it would lose however much it had, which is very little nowadays, since it's not very relevant to many people on its own. So, like, for those who don't know, I did not purchase Pokemon Sword or Shield, and especially considering how much you would be paying for the premium Pokemon experience, that's not a fund I want to be pushing into, since they've been showing their nasty sides a bit more. The whole, we're just going to take out a whole bunch of Pokemon to sell to you again. And no, there is a fee behind it, because now they're literally tying like a $16, well, 16 for America, $16 fee just to have your old Pokemon back. The update's only free if someone else bought the DLC, which, by the way, something is free when you purchase it. That's called a purchase. That's what a purchase is. You get something free by purchasing something. Which is something that, admittedly, Webkinz also suffers with. They also just toss around the word free similarly in all of their promotional advertisements. And yeah, that's what a purchase is. So, the whole thing is ridiculous. I feel like the other game, though, is a bit more lax with it because of the fact that, in the end, the ability to raise a pet in the ladder in the actual simulator game is still, at the end of the day, free. Now that accounts have a free version, it's very crap, but it's there. There's also the fact, like, when you do purchase a pet, you're getting a more substantial experience compared to purchasing a DLC for half of a Pokemon, where you don't even get all of the Pokemon back, which is still less than the previous game's cartridges from, like, less than 3 years ago. And I'm sorry, that's not worth it to me. I've played Pokemon, I've played the same. You start the game with a Tacklemon and then you eventually evolve them into a big mon that you defeat the champion with. I've done that quite a few times now. I don't need to do it a billion more. Just because it's a big brand, by the way, doesn't shield it from criticism or, the fact that something bad could happen to it one day. And that goes for this other game as well, really. And it's something I keep in mind all the time, which is kind of why I'm a little anxious about a couple of the things I wanted to mention. A lot of the kinds of people playing Webkinz are the extremely simple type of person. The one that is using a computer for the first time kind of deal. Because I've seen a lot of videos of people trying to talk about features of the game when it's clear that they really were not on the site very long to understand even how it worked on a basic level, when there were clear pages detailing, like, the frequently asked questions as to the membership and the everything that it encompassed is things that even basic people didn't read back then because it was too comprehensive for them to do it, or and they didn't even think to ask a parent, so they just assumed and thought their own assumptions was what the site did and how it worked, even though these things were in plain text for anyone, including kids, to read. Which is what I had done back then, because for a long period of time after I was introduced to it, I couldn't actually get on the site because I didn't have one. I was just told about it and couldn't really get on for a few months. So all I had to do was read up on how it worked because, well, I'm just a 10-year-old in school. I don't really have a whole lot to do, and the computer is kind of limited when you only have dial-up in 2008. So, and like you've also got to think that this was the me back then that eventually, because it took up so much of my computer space, I knew about Task Manager, but my CPU was at 100 all the time. Not because, like, there was, like, a virus or anything. I think there was eventually, but, like, I just assumed it being at 100 was a good thing. I was a very dumb 10-year-old. So... with the way I play it, I feel like I could provide a unique perspective somehow, but similar to the Chao, I don't know how to do it yet, because, again, I do not want to make like a 20-part series of just recordings of that kind of thing. I don't record myself playing the game all the time. I'm not in the mood to record all the time. I kind of have to be in a specific mood if I'm going to make a video of a thing, and especially since I've sort of noticed more recently, every time I record something, the colors of it change a bit. And, like, I mean, like, recording something that was from the computer. Greens turn, like, this really darker shade for some really weird reason. I can't explain why. But it just happens. A lot of the other colors also dilute for some reason, and it's really weird. I don't know if it has anything to do with the recording settings, because this has happened across Fraps, OBS, and every other program you can think of that I've tried to record with. It's basically only those two, but it's really weird. I don't know why. It's not completely preventing me from that. It also has to do with my own mentalities. There's also the fact that I don't really know what to record with it. Do I record myself tripping on glitches all the time? Because I could definitely talk about that for a while. Do I record myself commenting on how censored the blog site is? Do I make this thing where I make myself seem overly negative, but in actuality I'm just stating the criticisms and then, you know, boasting about my house so then people can be inspired to design themselves their own large mansions, potentially, because back in 2008 I had been friends with someone, I don't know, we had pets that wore literally the same outfits, and I had gone to their house and they had gotten like a whole bunch of, I don't remember specifically what they had, but they had a whole bunch of rare items, and they had like a billion rooms, and I was like, wow, this is so cool, I want to make my own house like this if one day. And I guess I have, question mark, times 10, because it's very big now and has a lot of items in it, but now you can't invite friends to your house anymore. I kind of want to show it, not just like, you know, so I can get some internet points for decorating a paper dollhouse, but, you know, I kind of, like, the core of it, the decorating and the moving around the house bit, is the fun part. And I kind of want to talk about that as much as I want to talk about the flaws of how everything is censored and how everything is kind of not really where it probably should be. A voice of reason amidst some of this, some of what I have seen, which is not really very detailed or even very critical. A lot of it is very biased, and I kind of want to do something about that, but I kind of also don't want to make it seem like I'm overly negative. I don't know. I want to do something with it, but, you know, the game is so irrelevant, people probably think it's silly to be talking about this thing when it's for kids, even though kids don't deserve crap, pure crap. And it's personally on a like an ideal opinionated level, I really don't think many actual children are playing this game nowadays. I was at like a family outing for like Christmas lately, and someone older had like the idea to ask one of the young kids, what are the hip games these days? And like the kids in my family are like very young, like close to 10, and she listed like 3 games which were Roblox, Fortnite, and Minecraft, I think. And that's like a kid that's 10 years old, like, now. Now, obviously I'm not going to say like every single child is this child, but I have a little bit of an inkling, I guess, that there aren't very many children these days playing this game, especially with the people that I've encountered in the actual game and the kinds of people that I see talking about the game. Obviously, social media sites don't really encourage children to be on them, but of even the places I have been on, I've kind of been doubtful that a lot of the people there are really like young, like 13 years old or 14 young. There might even be a few that are playing the game that are younger than those ages, but I kind of doubt they're the majority. At least not anymore, compared to back then. So, I kind of just want to, like, talk about that kind of thing at some point. I don't know. At some point, maybe. I do want to integrate it more into the channel, especially since it has been a large part of my life behind the scenes, and I don't really want to just trash it if anything is kind of meaning to go by. I kind of just want to make a video about like the billions of glitches I found in it at some point. And I mean like billions. Okay, that's an exaggeration, but really I've been encountering like glitches like sticks. I'm practically tripping on them every session I'm on. I see them. So I should probably do something about that at some point, but again, I kind of want to deal with the sea thing and things are nuts, so that'll be at some point, just not immediately, because I have a million other things I want to do first, so yeah, but I do want to do it at some point. My main focus is the Splatoon project because that's literally been the main focus of everything in my entire internet thing. So, well, not really entire, but you sort of get it, right? Like, I've been focusing for a long period of time. I've been doing this for like almost 3 years, and I want to focus on that before I come back to YouTube and do random luxury stuff. There's also like real life personal things on the side that I'm trying to balance with all of this as well. So you kind of have to understand that it's gonna take a while to do things. So there's that to consider. So I will do things, but just don't expect them immediately. In the meantime, here's the everything, I guess.